Okay, so let's start with the basics. These trucks originally come with a NP233 transfer case. Now, it's not a terrible transfer case, it's a chain-driven case, and an easy way to upgrade it, especially if you're gonna straight axle your truck, is you'll actually end up using parts from an NP231. Now that's going to be a more common T case found in a Jeep Wrangler TJ, you can find them in Jeep Wrangler YJ, and a Jeep Cherokee XJ. They're pretty good cases in that they have good aftermarket support, and doing a 231 to 233 sort of hybrid case build will allow you to fix some of the shortcomings of the 233, which is they have a slip output in the front and a slip output in the back. So you go to a fixed output using the 231 parts and you end up with a pretty decent case. And if this truck was only going to be maybe 35 straight axled or maybe 37s, I think it's a pretty good option. But for me, running 40s and having the weight of the 1-ton axles, I wanted something that was going to give me more gear reduction. So I ended up going with a Advanced Adapters 4-speed transfer case. Now the underdrive box, which is the Ford gearbox of the Atlas, is a 2.72 to 1 planetary set. So that's sort of a fixed number. Now the main case, you can actually get a handful of different ratios. I opted for a 2 to 1, and when you double both of these together, I have a 5.44 to 1 low range ratio. Advanced Adapters made this 4-speed specifically for the S10, meaning that they already had a adapter that goes onto the back of the stock 4L60 transmission and a tone ring that would go onto the output shaft. And this is where my new speedometer pickup would go, and it's been flawless. I've never had an issue with that. Now, the other big advantage of the Atlas, which ended up being really critical for me later on in this build, is that you can clock the transfer case. It comes with a handful of mounting solutions, so you can either make this thing super flat underneath the truck, or you can, let's say my phone is the transfer case and this is the front output, you can clock it and rotate it this way. And that's what I ended up having to do. In terms of building the transfer case out itself, I went with cable shifters, just a lot easier to work with and navigate inside of the cab. Essentially, you build that stuff out pretty simply. There's not anything really complicated. They have this basic shift fork configuration that you put on what I'll call the main portion of the case, and then there's a small arm that you build out and attach the the cable drive for the underdrive. So very easy. Advanced Adapters does very clean and concise instructions for how to do all that. So that was very easy. Now in terms of actually getting this thing in the truck, originally I picked up a Crossmember from Sky's Manufacturing. Now this is actually a straight axle Crossmember for these S10 trucks, and it's a good Crossmember. It bolts right in place, and if you're kind of do-it-yourself type guy and want to do a straight axle kit, like, it's a great Crossmember to have. My challenge, what I ended up finding, is that we had to clock the transfer case eventually, so I ended up having to cut it all up and notch it down to allow for that front drive shaft to drop out. So just something to be aware of if you're going to go something as big as this. Now for the rear portion, I was a little concerned about just having that single Crossmember, so I ended up picking up a TMR Atlas support, and what it does, it goes on the rear output of the Atlas and sandwiches the output housing, and then you essentially take a piece of tubing and make your own Crossmember for it. And so we wanted some type of skid plate that would tie everything in together, and so if I did come down on it, I had something a little bit more robust if that happened. So that's how that was sort of made. It's all a mixture of 3/16 and 1/4 inch steel. It's super heavy duty. It's all, the skid plate can be removed and all bolt on. You can pick whatever outputs you want for the Atlas, another huge advantage. I ended up going with a 1350 output front and rear. Could have gone bigger, didn't think I really needed to, especially considering the amount of power this truck has and what I'm going to do with it. Single piece rear drive shaft. It's fairly long, but it hasn't been an issue so far. So knock on wood, I can keep the truck out of the rocks from barber poling that, as they say. Okay, so this is one of my favorite features of this truck, and that is the custom center console. Now, we had to come up with a place to obviously put the shifters. They are cable driven or cable actuated, if you will, but you still have to have a firm mount to put them somewhere. Now, I wanted something that was going to be easy to access. We needed a place for the rear locker switches, so the owner of Low Range recommended, hey, why don't I just build you a custom center console? Won't be that hard. We'll do it pretty basic. And so that's what we did. It's primarily 1/2-inch square tubing with basically sheet metal bolted to the outside. I love it. It's all stainless steel bolts. It's bolted together. I think it came out fantastic. He notched me out a nice hole here so I can reuse the stock console from the original truck, or from the original console, which is nice. So you have a nice padded place to put your arm and still be able to drop things. You can pull it all the way out pretty quickly. So if I do have an issue with a wiring issue or something with one of the shifters, I can access it without having to take everything or the panels back apart. It's a twin stick unit, so this is for the, what we'll call the main case, and this stick that's closest to me is for the underdrive. Now these two sticks control the front output and the rear output. Now the fact is I wanted these fairly high so I could grab and shift them fairly easily. That's why they're sort of sitting up high in the truck. Again, could have mounted them much lower. There's just one hole in the floor. That's a nice thing about having a cable driven case, but this is how we opted to do it. And you end up using these levers a little bit more than you really would think. And the main reason is, typically when I'm on a trail ride, I will be just with the main case into low range. And then when we get to an obstacle, I will click the underdrive gearbox in. That gives me that total drive of 5.44 to 1, and this thing can just crawl and cruise, and it's not a big deal. And then when I am done with that obstacle, I pop it back out. I can go a little bit faster. If I had to do it again, I would probably go with a 3-to-1 ratio in the main case. I think the added low range would really help overall. I thought I'd end up putting a V8 in it a lot sooner. I don't think I'm going to be doing that anytime. I've just got too many other projects and things to do at this current moment. The truck runs and drives fine. It's not a trailer queen. I do drive at long distances, and it's just not super fast. It'll still go 70 miles an hour, but in the mountains, it definitely struggles a good bit to kind of keep that speed. But overall, very happy with it. Probably going to end up adding a few extra cross members, but beyond that, in terms of the transfer case and underside, it's all pretty solid. So far, I've had this together for a few years now. No issues out of the transfer case. Gear-driven cases do make a little bit of noise, but not enough so that it's super obnoxious. And honestly, with mud grapplers, you're not really hearing the transfer case that much anyhow. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments. Be happy to answer them here. If you want to see a full build breakdown on this, you can actually watch my video I did for Driving Line Magazine, which is going to go on the screen now. And yeah, so if you guys have any, behind the scenes photo wants or anything like that, you can always check out my Instagram at Ali Mansour Editor, where I'll post up stuff about this. And you can actually find this full build on Four Wheeler Magazine's website. That's who I originally built the truck for and kind of through. So there are a ton of build articles through them. So I appreciate you guys watching, and hope to see you guys on the trail soon. All right, take care.